Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to this week's stitching on the coverlet of Comfort. That's the right way around, isn't it? I just wanted to say before I get into it that if you're new here and you're worried that you've missed the boat because this is a project that I began in January, don't worry, because all of these monthly prompts are designed to be used as standalone. So if you haven't been here since January and you don't want to catch up, you can easily just take an element from a month that you like and do something else with it. Just make it as an individual wall hanging or use it in your own work in some way or whatever. And I think this month's the Kantha inspired embroidery, which I started last week, and I've got a bear, hope that's in the right place, Stella bear, and a tiger cat to represent my dog and my cat. Yeah, you can absolutely just use them as standalone. You can imagine that if you put a board around it, you could make a cushion or a wall hanging or something like that. So I just wanted to say that because there's been some new people joining us recently, which is lovely, and welcome. But some of you have said, oh, how am I going to catch up if I go back to January and we're now in May, and so on and so forth. You could also, if you wanted to do an entire coverlet, just start now with these blocks. I started in January with the theme of self, and then I've attached things around. There's no reason why you can't just join us now, start along with what we make from now on for the rest of the year, join them together as they are, and then put the earlier blocks on later. Do you see what I mean? Because it's a patchwork, eclectic, cobbled together kind of cloth. So there's absolutely no reason why you can't join us at any point. Just make the things independently if you want to. Pick the ones you like and leave the ones you don't, or just join it together from now on. So yeah, I just wanted to come on and say that. So now I'm going to turn you around onto my desk, and I think this week I'm going to do some work on Stella Bear. So I'm going to share what I'm going to do, and this will be, if you're a complete newbie to embroidery of any kind and you're feeling a bit intimidated, I think I'm going to do something very simple using only running stitch, but which will give a traditional look of Nakshi Kantha, in Indian Kantha embroidery. So that's the plan for this week. So let's get onto my desk and get on with it. Okie dokie. Like I said, I'm going to work on Stella Bear. Apologies if there's noise, dogs barking and so on. It's really warm and I've got the door open. That's Angel. That's a little dog called Angel that belongs to neighbours of mine. She usually doesn't go on for long. She's got the cutest little face you've ever seen. Anyway, if she does go on and on, I will shut the window, but then I shall melt into a heap, so I really hope it's okay. What was I saying? Yeah. So here's my drawing that I showed you last week, if you were here. That I just drew myself, inspired by images on the internet, and you see it's got these kind of lines delineating, I can't even say it, different areas, and I haven't transferred those lines onto my bear. And now I want to do that because I'm going to do some stitching in all the different sections. Now I could just take a soft pencil, or if you use those handy dandy marking tools for drawing on cloth, the blue pens or the ones that go away with the iron and all that, I could just go ahead and just put the lines on gently in my pencil or my marking tool. But what I think I'm going to do, just for a change, is stitch them, but stitch them with a thread that won't show, so you won't be able to see what I'm doing, but I'll show you just so you get the gist, and then I'll go away and do that, and then I'll come back and do the fancy stitching with you. Because I've been looking at this, it's been hanging over the back of my chair, and you see how these two front feet look a bit weird. Kind of looks like a lobster's pincer. I think once I get these lines in to delineate the legs and the paws, it will look a lot better. So let's just do this line first around her head. And I'm just going to, it's quite simple. I mean, whatever animal you've got, you could do this. You can look at kind of logical points within the animal or the creature. Like here, it's going from the base of her neck up to her ear, and then a triangular shape going up to her hump, for want of a better word, her shoulder. And here it's coming from just behind her leg, and this makes like a sort of saddle area here. and here it's round to her rump. So if you've got your own drawing that you've done or that you've found on the internet, you can look for these obvious places where you could draw and experiment on a piece of paper first until you're happy with it. And here as well, you see this line here. If you look here, this just looks like a shape, whereas the minute I put this line in here, going from this back leg up to her rump, it will make it look like she's walking because this leg will be in front of this. Does that make sense? So what I thought I'd do is, I'll keep this as a reference, but I'll just put it to one side, so you probably won't be able to see it. I've just got a needle threaded with some normal sewing thread. This is just some vintage stuff out of my DMC box from my auntie. There's a video somewhere if you haven't seen that, but there's loads of this vintagey hand sewing cotton in there. Sorry, machine sewing cotton, so I'm using it up. Also got sweaty hands in case you wanted to know. It's really muggy. We had rain for about 5 minutes, not enough, and now it's stopped again. Anyway, so I've just got one length of that in my needle, and you could draw the line first if you wanted to, but I'm just trying to not draw, just to try a different way of doing it. So this is a short distance from the base of her neck up to here, and I'm just going to stitch a line, which, like I said, you won't be able to see, but I will. And because that's a short distance, I'm just going to do it by eye. If it was a longer distance, or you weren't confident of being able to do a straight line, you can lay your sewing thread on in the direction you want to go and hold it there with your thumb so the thread's making a line, and then come back to where your thread's coming out and just take your stitches along your thread. So I'm just taking a few stitches. If I had a longer needle I could possibly even get all the way along my thread and pull them through, and just leave that thread laying. You don't have to pull it right through. This is also Kantha. They don't pull the threads right through. They often use a great long piece of thread, you know, like what we here in our community call a lazy girl thread. Doesn't even come into it, and it's not because they're lazy, it's just what they do. And they take several stitches and pull a bit through and keep going like that, and then right at the very end they pull the whole lot through. So now I'm up to where I want to be, and now I can just pull the whole lot through like that. So now I've got a line that's barely visible, but it's enough for me to delineate that area for when I want to do my fancy stitching. So apologies if you can't see, maybe I should do it. I'll tell you what I'll do, just for you. I'll park that there. I've got here some grey in my needle. So say I want to do, whoops, this line from just behind her front leg up to the front of her saddle, let's call it. And I'm not really bothered if it's exact, you know, if it ends up in exactly the same place, as long as I'm somewhere in the region. So I'm going to come up here just behind this front leg. In fact, I will put a knot because I can always just cut the knot off afterwards. If you want to do this with a thread that you can see, then of course you could absolutely do that, but I just thought it would be nice to delineate the areas without actually stitching, you know, having the stitching showing. So I want it to, I'm just looking at my drawing, I want it to come about there. So I hold it with my thumb. Obviously you need to make sure you've got a long enough thread to do this. And then come back, and then from where you're coming out you want to go a stitch forward, a stitch length forward. And then just take a few stitches. You can do it a little bit at a time, you don't have to hold the full length if it's awkward. Put it back where you want it. Stitch along, pull through but not all the way through. Put that thread back where I want it. And stitch along. Probably just get where I want to be. And then once you've got to the end of where you want your line, you can pull it all completely through. If you pull it too tight and you see it really puckering, you can just gently pull the cloth and slide it back into place. And there you can see my slightly wonky line. So that's the idea. So that stops, that means you don't have to draw on your cloth. And I would rather stitch than draw. I'm better at stitching than I am at drawing, so I'm going to get that out now. I'm going to cut the knot. So I'll get that out. So I'm going to go on and stitch all my lines with cream, and then I'll come back and show you what I'm going to do next. Okay, I've done all my stitching that you can't see, but I can see it, and you'll be able to see yours obviously. And I've decided to do her in green. I don't know why. She's actually brown, my little dog, who this represents. But yeah, I just felt like doing green. So I've been through my Tangly Orts nest and I've pulled out some greens, just spotted another bit there. Now the thing is, if you're using leftover bits of thread on a project like this, there's always the concern that you might run out. And these are very small areas, and you know that I'm sure is enough for even the biggest of those areas. But if you had some little odd bits like this, these are all slightly different shades. So what you can do, this is all stranded embroidery thread, what you can do, especially if they're similar lengths, to make it go further, is put together a few that are similar colours. Let's just get two here. Like those two. They're similar, but they're not the same. They're the same kind of tone. And then I like to stitch usually with 2 strands of floss, so I'm just going to take a strand of each. Obviously if you stitch with more strands you could take 2 strands of each, or 1 of one and 2 of the other, or whatever. And then they'll blend and they'll go twice as far as if you just went with one colour of one leftover length, if that makes sense. I'm going to put them over to my right so I remember which they were. So I'm just going to get 1 strand of each. And the other thing is, if you then still run out, you can get another 2 similar colours and put those together, and it won't be as obvious as if it was one colour and you changed to a different colour. I hope that makes sense. You follow me. So I've got both lengths through my needle. I'm going to pull my thumbnail down them just to make them lay nicely. Now they are slightly different lengths, so I am going to just trim them the same length. So all I'm going to do now is just pick an area on my bear, and I don't think I'm going to do her face green. I think I might do, I don't know, maybe I will. I'll just show you this because it's maybe clearer for you to see. I think maybe I'll do her muzzle, her ear and her paws in maybe a rusty brown colour, and the rest of her in green. So maybe I will start with doing her face. Now what I'm planning to do is just use the direction of the stitches and the different shades of the thread to create the interest, because I'm only going to use running stitch like I said. So I'm going to kind of think about what direction suits what shape, what direction of stitching. And I think for her face it would be best if the stitches go this way, if that makes sense. So I'm going to just start here under her chin, and I can see the line of cream that I stitched, and like I said you'll be able to see yours. I'm going to come up just inside that line, and then I'm going to stitch. I'm going to just follow that contour of her jaw. I mean, it's nearly a straight line, not quite. Yours obviously will be different unless you've done my Stella Bear, which is fine. I'm going to just do quite small running stitches, smaller than I would normally do. And with Kantha embroidery you will see there is puckers in the cloth, and it doesn't traditionally use wadding, though of course if you want to use wadding then you can. We're doing inspired by here, so you know, we can do us. I personally like to stitch on 2 layers of cloth. I like the feel of it in my hand, I like the act of stitching through 2 layers, and I like the look of it. And then you can play with the tension in the thread, because the way we're working here in the slow stitch style, we've got lots of margin of error and things, you know, ways to get things to match up with other things if they need to, and so forth. So we don't need to worry if it shrinks. So for my next line I'm going to come up a short distance away. I'm about 1/8 of an inch. And just because I don't want all the stitches to line perfectly up, I've come up sort of halfway along that previous stitch, that last stitch in the previous row. So halfway along it. I mean, don't stress over this, but I don't want stacked running stitch where they all line up perfectly with each other. That's not the look I'm going for. I'm looking for a more organic look. And now I'm just going to stitch, and I stopped just where I can see my line that delineates her muzzle. And now I'm going to just stitch back the other way. I've just got my eye on my first line. I'm not going to stress about being perfectly parallel. In fact, I probably will vary the distance here and there, because I'm not filling a square or a rectangle, I'm filling her face, so I'm filling her face. Filling your face is an expression where I come from for eating a lot of food. So the other little tip is, if you shoot through to the back, pull your thread through and then start afresh on your line, your last stitch will lay much straighter. If you go in and then come out with your needle ready to come back the other way, it makes that last stitch bend a bit. Nina, I'm sure you're watching, said in our Facebook group, it's like the poor donkeys on the beach, you know, that give children rides on the beach. As they're getting near to the end where they know they're going to turn and come back, they start bending before they get there. That's what your stitches do. So I always shoot through to the back and then come back up and start the new line new. So again, I'm coming out somewhere so I'm not exactly parallel with that first stitch. And I'm just going to stitch back the other way. Tiny little stitches. And now, because this is kind of a wedge shape, her face, I'm thinking I might just splay out a little bit as I come back in the other direction. So I'm going right to the line of my cream stitches, you know, where my muzzle will be, or is. So as I come back along the line, I'm going to start off, that's too far away, I'm going to start off the same distance that I have been doing for the first few stitches. But as I come towards where I'm going to stop and turn, I'm just going to very gently, not too much, just go a little bit further away. So I'm just going to aim for my stitches to fan out a little bit. Otherwise they'll all line up this way, parallel to this first line, and then by the time they get up here they'll be, you know, I just think it looks more realistic. It's nowhere near realistic, but I don't know, more natural looking maybe is a good way of putting it. So do you see there, I've got a slightly bigger gap at this end. So same thing again, I'm going to start slightly further over than I have been doing. And this to me is all part of slow stitching. It's just looking and paying attention and seeing what needs to be done as you go along and what feels right. And so then now as I stitch down this way, sorry for the big bumpy trailer going over a speed bump outside. As I stitch down this way, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to come gently in a little bit as I come up back towards the muzzle. Because I laid two threads together from two different skeins, it's possible that one thread is spun one way and one's the other. There's no way of knowing in that Tangle-Yort's nest. They do tend to separate. People often suggest waxing thread. I would wax thread for doing hand piecing. I don't wax it for embroidery because I don't like the way it makes the thread go slick. You know, it loses its fluff. But if you want to wax your thread, then obviously you do you. I'd rather just pull them into place as I go. So coming back the other way, and I'm just looking again, just seeing what is the area I need to fill in. I'm not going up into her ear. There's a line here that you probably can't see. So I'm filling in this area around her eye. So I'm just looking where I'm going to come in relation to her eye. As I come along here, I can get one line there where my needle's laying, and then another line just under her eye. So I don't want this to come too far up because I do want to fit another line in. Because if I put a line here and come up here like this, I think that'll look odd. It's just a decision I've made as I'm going along. So I'm just coming along again. My stitches are getting a little bit in line with each other, so what I do then, or you could pull it out and do it again, but I'd rather do anything than that, is just vary your stitch length a little bit. So instead of making this stitch the same the same length as I have been doing, which will stack it with this, you can either make it slightly bigger or slightly smaller, whichever seems logical. I think I'm going to make it slightly bigger on this occasion, so that I come a little bit level with the gap here, and then I'm going to make the gap slightly bigger again as well. So now I'm back to kind of halfway this stitch. I hope that's clear. So you see that stitch is now slightly bigger, but I'd rather that than have them all lining up as they were starting to do. So now I'm past the eye, I can start to do my very gentle splaying out at the end. And the same thing, when you start coming towards the end of your line of stitching, you can sort of take a view, do I need to make my stitches a bit smaller or a bit bigger to fill the gap? And this is what keeps me endlessly absorbed in doing running stitch, anywhere, on anything. All these little decisions as you go along. So I decided to make my stitches slightly smaller there to fit them in. And this is why I say to people, especially when they're beginners, and I know people stress about two things usually. One is making their lines of stitching all parallel to each other. I would say don't worry. I mean, I know that's easy for me to say, but if you do enough, I stitch very heavily, and if you do a lot of heavy stitching, if the odd line's not perfectly parallel, you really don't see it. Even I don't see it, and I don't mean even I, you know, in some big-headed way. I mean even you won't see it, because we tend to see the mistakes in our own work, don't we, more quickly than other people do, what we perceive as mistakes. So what I would say is, I often say don't draw lines on your cloth. I certainly wouldn't do it here. I've done everything I can to avoid drawing on it. Obviously, if you want the comfort of drawing a line and stitching along it, then you know, you do you. But I think it makes you it makes your stitching less fluid, because you're worrying about following the line rather than just stitching. Now here I'm right under her eye, so I can take a stitch and then I can just make the space kind of the length of her eye, and then carry my line on. And another tip is look where you're going, not where you are. So when you're getting near to the end, obviously if you're doing a great long line you can't look, you know, 3 feet away, but as I'm coming along here, I'm kind of got an imaginary spot here somewhere that I'm aiming for, and I'm looking at that spot. And your needle's straight unless it's bent. I mean, I know we all get bent needles every now and then, but your needle is pointing you in the direction that you want to go. So you can lay your needle on even and burn that line into your brain, if that makes sense. You can even literally push the line into the fabric, and there are those creasy tools, hair markers, that people use as well. Again, it's just not for me. I just like minimal tools. And I just like to come up with these little tricks, like here, if I'm putting my needle through there, I can see I'm heading in the right direction for where I want to be. And again, it's practice. As with all things, it's practice. And you learning what you're happy with. You know, you learning that about yourself. So I need to get one more tiny stitch in there just to get me to the end. So now I'm going to look back, come up again, and then look back along my line, come up just there, and now I'm going to end up above. I could either do a line that goes slightly through the eye and not stitch the eye, just pass it under the eye, or I could go slightly above the eye like that. So I'm using my needle there just because you know, the needle's in my hand, use it. I don't have to go and find another tool, I use what's there. So I can lay my needle on and visualise as if that's the line of stitching, and I think that looks good with her eye between those two lines, so that's what I'm going to go for. So again, I just start stitching, and as I stitch I just keep looking at that imaginary line where my needle just was. It's one of those things that's quite difficult to explain. I hope I'm explaining it well enough. But if it clicks with you, it will help you enormously to keep your lines, you know, pleasingly straight. And I say pleasingly straight because that can be different things to different people. One more stitch through to the back and turn. So now I've got her ear just starts here, right here by my thumbnail. So I'm going to come just a little bit further in because I don't want to stitch into her ear area. And so now I need a line that comes sort of there. And I don't often, when I've unthreaded my needle, I don't often take more than one stitch at once, but with things like this, if you take a few stitches in a row, and if you use a much longer needle, you can take more stitches in a row. I just like a short needle. That helps keep you straight as well, because you're taking, you know, your needle straight, like I said. Yeah, so I'm just aiming for there. I mean, this seems like a lot of fuss for a running stitch, but I get asked, or I see comments all the time. Here in the comment section and in the Facebook group, and yeah, I just want to help you if I can with things that I've picked up over the years. So now I can get one more line in, I think, just inside her ear hole. That sounded very West Country, ear hole. So, you know, you do what you think and then you look at your work, and it seems an obvious thing to say, but it's not. It's very difficult to be objective about your own work, and also you can get too close to it. So there's her little face with her little green stitches. I do think I would like it a little bit denser, more dense. I think I'm going to. So I've just made that decision in the moment, so I'll just put one more tiny stitch there. So now I'm going to just come back in between those lines and just basically go up the middle of them, just keeping them, this line of stitching, halfway the distance from the lines either side. Yes, that's better. If you're, I mean, here we're obviously working on a whole piece of cloth, but if you're stitching on a collage piece or some cloth weaving or something else that you've, you know, assembled with straight seams, you can use your seam lines as guidelines all over your piece. That's another reason I love stitch meditation scrolls. Which, if you don't know what they are, I shall show you one. I think most of you do, but like I said, there have been a few newbies. Here's one. I'm showing you something. Look up if you've gone back to your crochet, or your knitting, or whatever. So this is a long, thin strip of a bit of old sheet onto which I have collaged with stitch, I don't glue, scraps of cloth, but then the stitching on it is entirely, in my case, just lines and lines of running stitch in all different colours, pulled from my tangly mess. And this is straight line heaven, because you're never that far away from a guideline, because it's only 2 inches wide. So you start stitching parallel to one edge, and then the next line of stitches is parallel to your first line, but you can still see that's only ½ an inch away from the edge. So do you see what I mean? And even if you get right into the middle, like here for example, you see the edge of this piece of cloth acts as a guideline for this line of red stitching. So Stella's licking her paws because she needs clipping and her hair's getting too long. So yeah, so that's one of the, and there you see on the blue there. So I've used that line of that blue piece of cloth. As I was stitching, I would have been keeping an eye on that to make sure this line of stitching is parallel. And that to me is part of the, well, it is the ethos of slow stitch, but it's part of the meditation in a stitch meditation scroll, that you're doing this repetitive running stitch. It uses your tiny scraps and a bit of old sheet, so it's, you know, it's, people often ask, say, what do you do with them? I don't do anything with them, especially, they're just objects, you know, they're just about the place, and they are lovely to hold and they're lovely to handle, but for me it's the process of doing them. And I'm sure most of you know that, but just in case you're new. And there is a video, it's one of the earliest videos I ever made here, and I might actually do a new video about it at one point, we'll see. So that's Stitch Meditation Scroll. But yeah, that's a great way to practice your running stitch if you're one of those people stressing about your stitches not being in a straight line and all that. Because you just stitch and stitch and stitch for yards and yards and yards, and you don't have to turn direction, change direction, or anything like that. You just stitch. And that's the best way to get a rhythm, get into a rhythm. So now I'm just going back, and this is really pleasurable to do because I don't have to worry any more about anything except for filling in between. And I will often do that on my other pieces, like on my Stitch Meditation Scrolls and my larger pieces. Just go and stitch some parallel lines, you know, 1/4 of an inch apart, and then just go back and stitch in between them. Just because I like to stitch. We were talking, I'm a member of a textile art group of artists here in the West Country. We exhibit together and so on. We were talking the other day about people's work having a voice, you know, being recognisable as that person's work. And someone said, we always know it's yours, Catherine, because there isn't a square millimetre of cloth that doesn't have a stitch in it. It's an opportunity, a little bit of cloth, just crying out for a stitch. So I'm not even really worrying any more about stitching and spacing. What I am doing now is, excuse me, playing a little bit with the tension because I just love those Kantha ripples. So, and I don't even need to start my line right at the beginning. If I decide down here they're close enough together and I can't squeeze a stitch in there, I just come in a little bit and start from there. It's really just looking at what you're doing and making little judgments as you go. And what I am liking about the stitching, which I didn't really plan, I didn't plan at all, is that it kind of looks like hairs growing, you know, the fur growing. Okay, so I finished her face. So my next section, it's probably easier to show you on my drawing, is this section here, this wedge shape just behind her neck. So because I've got the stitches on her face going this way, I'm going to put the stitches on this going this way. So the direction of the stitches, and I've chosen a darker green, will give some movement and some contrast in the shape. That's my thinking anyway. So again, I've taken two shades of dark green that were slightly different and put them together in my needle with a knot. And because this is a triangle shape, I'm going to start at the point of the triangle down here, and I'm going to stitch kind of by eye up the middle for my first line. So I end up sort of halfway along the long edge. Now your shapes may well all be different. I'm just trying to come up with ways of explaining what I'm doing that then will hopefully be helpful. So you could, again, if you were worried about it being perfectly straight, do the laying on the thread trick. I'm not worried, I'm just going to, you know, it's going to get stitched all over. So as tiny a stitches as I can manage. And again, if you want to do bigger stitches, you can. I just felt like doing tiny stitches. There's no right or wrong. Till I get up to the other side. And I think now I've got that centre line, I can then work myself out one way and then come back and work myself out the other way, doing the gentle radiating thing that I did on her face. So I'm going to come in a fair bit, about 1/4 of an inch, and I so much enjoyed going back and stitching in between, so I'm now going to do that deliberately. I could say no, I need to go closer together and go ahead and do that, but I'm not going to. I'm not gonna. I'm going to do the same thing I did before and then fill in between if I feel it needs it, which probably will. There's a fly in here, I hope it's not annoying you. So just right up until I reach my initial line of cream thread that I stitch right back at the very beginning. And again, take your last stitch through to the back and then turn. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's amazing how much time it takes, but you know, I'm not rushing. We're here to enjoy ourselves. Okay, I've reached my outer line, my guideline. So now I can simply stitch myself back to the middle by just going into the gaps wherever I think I can squeeze in a few more stitches. If you're worried about your back being tidy, I'm not. But if you are, and you need to jump anywhere, you can just come over to the back and then just put your needle into your backing cloth, come underneath and then come out wherever you want to come out. I would do that if I had to make a big jump, you know, of say more than ½ inch, but otherwise I just don't worry. But that's me. It depends also what you were going to use it for. I mean, I don't mind even my finished coverlet having a messy back. I will show you at the end of the year how to put a backing on if you want to. But if you were making obviously a cushioned cover or something like that, it wouldn't matter anyway, would it? Okay, so I've got back to the middle line where I started, going back into the centre, and the lovely ripples. So now I'm going to just do exactly the same thing going in the other direction. So I'm going to start slightly wider at the top of my triangle and taper in as I come down towards the narrower part. And then when I get out to my outer guideline, I'll stitch myself back in through the middle lines. And I hope that's clear. It's not necessary that you stitch your lines slightly further apart and fill back in. I'm just choosing to do that because I like the process. You want to get them the right distance apart to start with, or you decide you like them wider apart, then you know, you do you, as always. Okay, so that's that little section done. So I'm going to go ahead now. You can see that that's taken me quite some time just to do those two little areas. Because I've got Fred as well, the Fred Tiger, to do this month, I think I'm going to go ahead and do all the rest of this running stitch in the sections, and then I'll come back to you when I've done that and show you the result up to that stage. Excuse me. So I'll see you in some hours time probably, but no time at all for you by the magic of video. Don't go away. Okay, it's the next morning. It's now Wednesday, it's the day that you'll see this video. I was all yesterday evening stitching my little bear, so I've done lots and lots of tiny stitches, all in different shades of green, I hope you can see, all going in different directions. I'm especially pleased with, you know, if you remember I mentioned the legs, just because these stitches are going this way and these are going that way, straight away, you know, it's obvious that's that leg, and they're kind of one behind the other. So all I've got left to do now are her little paws and her ear and her face, her muzzle, her nose. So I thought about, you know, doing some different kinds of stitching for those, but I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm just going to stick with simple stitching, but I just want to put a little inner ear. So I've got this very dark brown in my needle, and I'm just going to, I think for that, I haven't actually decided. Often when you hear me say I'm just going to, that's me thinking about what I'm just going to do. Yeah, I think I'm just going to do a little line of back stitch. Maybe the split back stitch, the same as we did the outlines last week. So I'm just going to come in somewhere just inside. You could draw it on first, I guess, but I think I'll just kind of mirror the outer line of that. So again, I'm just going to do tiny stitches, so a little forward stitch and up, and then split it slightly back and forward. And I'm doing them tiny because I need to do a curve shape to follow the line of the ear. And you get a much smoother curve if you just take tiny stitches. And you can vary the stitch length. If you're doing a long straight stretch, you can make them a bit bigger. And then when you get to the tight curves, you can make them a bit smaller. And Stella is a bit restless because we haven't been for a walk yet. I am dressed. Did think about sitting here in my pyjamas. Not that you could see me, so it wouldn't matter. But I did get dressed, but I haven't yet washed my face or cleaned my teeth or anything like that. And she knows once I do all that, that's the sign that we're about to go out for a walk. Oops, something thick there in the linen, a bit slubby. I'm going to just do a straight through to the back stitch, just because my linen's a bit slubby. Isn't slubby a fabulous word? I'll probably just get one more in there. So, you know, at this stage, you're just doing stitches. It doesn't really matter what they're called, or what they are, or if they're even an actual stitch. You're just kind of doing what you need to do. It's as if you're drawing or painting, I guess, only you're using a needle and thread. So now I need to come back down to the side of her face. Maybe one more. And I'm not sure if I want to close it along the bottom, so what I'm going to do is just go through to the back and have a look, and then I can decide. Yeah, no, I don't think I'm going to close it. I think I'm just going to leave it like that. That's good. So I'll finish that off, and doing these little details is a great way for using up all those tiny little bits, which is why it's worth keeping a little nest of all your bits and bobs. And I would still keep that. If it's kind of 6 inches or more, I can get a few stitches out of it, so back in it goes. Just cut that tail, that's a bit long. So now the next thing I want to do is not bury my needle, so I can't find it, is her mouth. And I got some red, which I've now lost. Where did I put that? There it is. And I'm going to do a kind of cartoony smile, I guess you'd call it. So I've got some dark red. Because as I drew that, I'll just show you my drawing again. On my drawing, she's got this kind of cartoony smile, and I just like the look of it. I just think it makes her look, you know, not threatening, which Stella is the very opposite of threatening. So I've got 2 strands again, and my needle, which I have now lost. Until it's first thing in the morning. I would say I haven't had my coffee yet, but I don't really drink coffee anymore. Well, that's not true. I do drink coffee if I go out somewhere and they've got nice coffee. But I don't drink coffee at home. Which is funny because when I lived in France, I was on sort of 6 cups a day or so of ground... Oh, there it is. Never mind, got another one. Of, you know, ground... We had a coffee making machine that took beans. But yeah, I now drink tea. I don't know why. But yesterday I went out in the morning, which is why I was late in the afternoon making my video. I met my friend Chrissy in Glastonbury. We didn't go around the town or up the Tor or anything, we were only there to look at a gallery as a possible exhibition space. Let me just decide what I'm doing with this mouth first. Now I had outlined it with the white in the beginning, but I think I might just do it with long stitches because it's only a short area. So I guess you'd call it satin stitch if you wanted to give it a name. So I've just gone there. I think I'll do the other side first. I'm just going over those white stitches that I made. They're not doing any harm, they're blending into the background. So I'm going to just do the 2 outlining stitches first, and again, like I did with the ear, then I'll have a look and decide if I want to fill it in or not, or if that's enough. Yeah, I think that does need more, and now I'm wondering whether to do a stitch going this way to close the triangle, or whether to just fill it in. I think if I didn't have my brown going across there, it would look okay open, but because the brown's there, it looks like her mouth's open but there's something there. So I'm just going to fill it in with satin stitches. So I'm just going to come back up next to my first line. I'm just going to do it with triangles, so I'm just stitching inside those two lines that I made, getting as close as I can to the outlining stitches. Back in the same hole and back this way. Maybe one more that side and one in the middle should do it. And if you're not sure, you can always just lay your thread on. Will that be enough? Well, there's still a little gap there. I think I'll just finish that. I'm just going to work my needle in underneath a little bit and see how that gap looks. That looks a bit odd, so I'm just going to fill it in with a stitch going across now. And back up here. Untwist my thread. If your thread gets twisted, it's tighter and it covers less ground. Yeah, I think if I just do one stitch across there just to finish it off, that will be fine. So if there's a take home at all from this video, it is to look at what you're doing, think about what you want to achieve, and just, you know, think a little bit outside the box rather than thinking, oh, I'm doing chain stitch so I must do chain stitch or whatever, you know. Yeah, I like that. She looks kind, benevolent bear. So I'll finish off that red, and I will get back to telling you about the gallery if you're interested. And I had some rusty red for the paws. I think I quite like the ear just as it is, actually. Now I see it with the mouth. I think I do want to do the muzzle. I think I'm going to do the muzzle and the paws all the same colour, and I've got this bit of, another bit of red there, I've got this bit of reddish brown. It's a dark brown, but it's slightly more red than the brown I outlined with. So I'm going to get 2 strands of that. Yeah, we went to look at this gallery as a possible exhibition space for next year for our group that we're both in, and it wasn't suitable, but we had a lovely time anyway. We had a coffee there whilst we decided that it wasn't suitable, and then we decided to go and have lunch somewhere. But before we did, we had a little quick look round the place. It's called the Somerset Rural Life Museum, so it's all about the history of farming and so on. And we couldn't really have a proper look round. Well, we could have done, but we hadn't paid to go in. We'd just gone into the cafe. But we did see this courtyard area, and in the middle of it was this big horse, not a real horse, an art installation. And it was made all from rusty scrap. And I did a little bit of video of it for you, which I will share in the next Park Home Life, which will be a week on Friday, because it was, you know, I mean, if you watch Park Home Life, you will remember a few weeks ago I went to Lyme Regis with Joey, my son, and showed you the statue of Mary Anning that stands there, and I was raving about it. Well, I shall be raving about this horse as well. It was just wonderful. So look forward to seeing that, a horse made. It was life size, you know, big horse size, made out of rusty scrap. So yeah, I thought, oh, I have to do a little video for the lovely people, so I did. Right, so this muzzle area. Now I've got these stitches all coming this way on her face, so what I was doing here was, if I had the stitches this way in this section, I was going a different way in the adjacent section. But I think here it makes more sense for the muzzle to have the stitches going the same way. So I'm just going to do the same thing that I did on her face, but carry on the lines in the brown. So just tiny stitches, just filling in. Yeah, so then we went and we drove out a little way outside of Glastonbury. We looked on our phone, you know, on Google Maps, and found this farm that has become a spa centre and a camping place and all that, and they had a lovely cafe, and so we just had a little lunch there, and then I came home again, and then I made this video, the earlier part of this video. I finished her muzzle, and I think I'm just going to leave that for now. I can always come back later, but I just really like the way that ear looks at the moment. But I am going to go and do her feet, so I've got my same rusty brown thread, and these three, it would seem obvious to stitch them going in the direction of her feet, you know, this way, flat to the ground, maybe this one under an angle, but this one, because her paw's kind of up, I think I will do the same thing as I did here, although those stitches are going that way, I'm going to carry on stitching in that direction. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll be back at the end to show you the finished piece and talk a little bit about what we're going to do on Friday in Friday's slow stitch video, and also next week. So I'll be back in a minute. That's her feet all done, and now I have stitched everywhere else. The ear looks unfinished indeed, so I have decided I've got some of the foot colour, I think, more or less. I'm just going to go around the outside of her ear, again with little running stitches. So I've done most of this only with running stitch. I outlined with the split back stitch, and the eye and the lips were satin stitch, but apart from that it's running stitch, which I'm quite pleased about. I'm just going to follow the contour, again with these tiny stitches. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this as a way of, you know, without having to do all the fancy Kantha stitch embroidery stitches that we looked at if you were here last year. I think next week when I come to do the Fred Tiger, I'll do it differently. I think I will use some different kinds of stitches. I'm not exactly sure yet, but I wanted to do it a little bit differently. I mean, the way I've drawn him, sorry my words, it's just been the full moon. If you've been here a while, you'll know that I have observed over the last few months that, or realised, because I think I've been affected by the moon probably my whole life. I know many of you have said that you're the same. But yeah, it's just been the full moon, so I just get the kind of fog head, and tired and a bit low and all that kind of thing, and it coincided with my son going back after having been here for the weekend, so that was sad as well. I mean, not sad that he came, but, you know, sad that he went. So yeah, I'm just getting over the moonies. Getting over the moonies. But someone had said, and I did do it one night, it was clear, to go out and look at the moon and kind of acknowledge her presence, and that did help. I went and stood outside and looked up at the moon. I guess that's part of self-awareness. For me it was anyway. It's, you know, just looking at the moon and saying to myself, yes, I feel like this, and that's because of the moon. But that's not necessarily, you know, without the moon we wouldn't be here, quite literally, because the moon keeps the earth rotating on its axis and all the rest of it. So certainly don't hold it against her that she makes me feel a bit blah. So then for the inside of, sorry, that was a digression. But I'm starting to feel, it was good yesterday I had that appointment already to go out and meet my friend. So that was good, that got me out, because on Monday I didn't do a lot. I've got some dark grey, I think I'll do that for the inside of the ear. Sorry if my fluffy head comes in. My head's even fluffier now than it used to be, as you know. Don't know what to do inside her ear now. So while I'm knotting my thread, I'm thinking. I think I'll just do the same. I'll just keep it simple and just outline with little teeny tiny running stitches. And I think this technique could, I mean, we're doing animals because that's our theme, but you could use it to fill in anywhere instead of seed stitching. I mean, a lot of the time if I want to fill an area on a piece I'm working on just with texture, I do seed stitch, and I think this would make a nice alternative to that. Just pick a direction and do tiny little running stitches, because it looks like regimented seeds. It looks like seed stitch and someone's planted the seeds in a line instead of scattering them. If that makes sense at all, I think it does. What's happened now? I've pulled my tail through. See, that's the Moonies as well. You get clumsy. Oh, I stubbed my toe. Joe was here. I was cooking bacon because he fancied a bacon sandwich. And so, oh no, I wasn't cooking bacon. It wasn't then. See, in my brain. It doesn't really matter for the sake of the story, but I like to be accurate. No, I was toasting a crumpet. And it wasn't even burning, but I have a smoke detector, of course, in the little hallway here. And usually when I'm toasting something or cooking bacon or something like that, I close the door because otherwise it sets it off. And I didn't close the door, and the smoke detector went off, and it makes that horrible noise which it has to make to alert you in an emergency. But Fred went diving out of the cat flap because he hates it. Stella got upset and started running up and down. So I, in a bit of a panic, lurched. There's a button you can push to turn it off. In the old days you used to have to waft a tea towel at them, didn't you? Whereas this one, there's a button. And because my ceilings are low, I can reach. But so as I lurched through to turn it off in the panic, I stubbed my little toe on the end of the kitchen door. And it still hurts now. That was on, I think that was on Saturday or Sunday even. Sunday, I think. No, Saturday. Anyway, I stubbed my toe, it swelled up and went purple, and it's now much better. that was I think that was the Mooney Clumsies. Anyway, so there's my Stella Bear all done. I'm very happy with her. I think I've really got the sense of her from the picture, her expression and everything, which I was happy with in the picture. So I hope you enjoy doing your animal, however you choose to do them, your creatures. Next week I'll do Fred the tiger in a slightly different way. I'm not exactly sure what yet. So there's that to come. And on this Friday in the slow stitch video, I'm going to do some more fancy stitching on my coverlet of Comfort, not this but the main body of it, and talk a little bit about how I decide what stitching I'm going to do where, in case that helps anybody, and probably witter on about other stuff as well. There hasn't been much wittering in this video, it's been mostly just telling you what I'm doing. So anyway, I shall do the little handheld just to show you in close-up as usual at the end, so stick around for that if you want to see. And meanwhile, thank you so much for watching and bearing with me. Oh, sorry, that was a dreadful pun. Sorry, lost it now. And I look forward to you joining me next time for more Cloth Tales. Bye bye.